Welcome to our deep dive. And tonight we're going into the world of 19th century French Spiritism.
Ooh,
We're going to uncover the story of Berthe of Fropo,
okay.
a name you might not be familiar with, but trust me, by the end of this you'll see why she's considered a key figure.
Sounds fascinating.
Imagine a world where communicating with spirits is all the rage, and you've got the backdrop for Fropo's story.
I can only imagine.
Huh.
Spiritism was absolutely booming back then.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a fringe belief. It
No.
was capturing the imaginations of intellectuals and everyday people alike.
So it was kind of like our modern obsession with true crime podcasts or paranormal documentaries.
Exactly.
Something that really captures the public interest.
Yes. And right in the middle of this burgeoning movement was Allan Kardec,
Okay.
the founder of Spiritism.
Right.
He codified the movement's beliefs and practices, essentially writing the rule book.
Uh-huh.
But as with any new movement, things weren't always smooth sailing.
Of course not.
After Kardec's death, a figure named Pierre-Gaëtan Lemery stepped into a leadership role.
Okay, so set the scene for us. Who was Berthe of Fropo?
Okay.
And how did she get involved in all of this?
Well, Berthe was born in 1821 into a well-connected family.
Okay.
Think nobles, military officers, even famous painters.
Wow. So not exactly someone you'd picture leading a spiritual revolution.
Not at first glance, no.
Right.
What's interesting is we don't know the exact moment she embraced Spiritism, but we do know she became a respected member of the Parisian Society of Spiritist Studies,
Okay.
and even more importantly, formed a close bond with Kardec and his wife Amélie.
Mhm.
After Kardec's death, she became Amélie's rock, supporting her until she too passed away.
That's a really powerful detail.
Yeah.
It shows this wasn't just an intellectual pursuit for Fropo.
Right.
It was about deep personal connections.
Absolutely. But here's where things get interesting.
Okay.
After Kardec's death, Berthe becomes increasingly critical of Lemery's leadership, accusing him of two major offenses. First, she claimed Lemery was lining his own pockets,
Ooh.
exploiting Kardec's legacy for personal gain.
Oh, that's never a good look.
No.
Especially in a movement centered around spiritual principles.
Exactly. The second accusation was even more explosive.
Okay.
Fropo argued that Lemery was muddying the waters of Spiritism
Okay.
by incorporating ideas from other often conflicting spiritualist movements, like Restainism and Theosophy.
Okay.
You have to understand, these movements had different ideas about the spirit world,
Yeah.
reincarnation, and even the nature of God.
Right.
For Fropo, who saw Kardec's teachings as pure and distinct, this was a betrayal of his legacy.
So it wasn't just about money.
No.
It was about the very soul of Spiritism.
Precisely, and here's where Fropo's courage comes in.
Okay.
In a time when women, especially in these circles, weren't expected to challenge authority,
Right.
she publicly confronted Lemery.
Wow.
This wasn't a quiet disagreement. It was a full-blown challenge to his leadership, rocking the boat of the entire Spiritist movement.
It sounds like Fropo was a real trailblazer,
Yes.
willing to speak truth to power, even when it was risky.
Yes, she was very courageous.
But how did she actually fight back against Lemery's influence?
she rallied other Spiritists who shared her concerns.
Okay.
Think of it as gathering the troops for a spiritual showdown.
I like it.
And get this, they held a séance at Madame Kardec's house,
Oh, wow.
seeking guidance from beyond.
Okay.
The message they received supposedly from Kardec's spirit
Yes.
was a clear call to action.
Oh, wow.
It said a new society was needed to uphold the true principles of Spiritism.
Wow, talk about dramatic.
It really was.
So a message from the other side leads to a split in the movement.
It did.
That's a story you don't hear every day.
That's true.
What happened next?
In 1882, they founded the Union Spirit Française,
Okay.
with Gabriel Delaine as president and, you guessed it,
Yeah.
Berthe Fropo as vice president.
Wow.
But they didn't stop there. They also launched a newspaper,
Oh.
Le Spiritisme, creating their own platform to challenge the existing publications controlled by Lemery.
So it was a media war
It was.
within the Spiritist community.
That's right.
So Fropo was a writer as well as an activist.
Yes,
She was. That makes her even more intriguing.
it does.
What does she actually write about in Le Spiritism?
She used her writing skills to lay out her arguments against Lemery in detail.
Right.
In 1883, she published an article titled A Little Light,
Oh.
hinting at what was to come.
Uh-huh.
This article was a prelude to a full-blown exposé she was working on,
Okay.
a book that would become a central piece of this whole controversy.
And that book was?
beaucoup de lumière,
Okay.
which translates to much light.
Interesting.
This was Fropo's bombshell.
Uh,
It went into explicit detail about all of Lemarie's alleged wrongdoings, sparking a firestorm within the Spiritist community.
it sounds like something straight out of a historical thriller.
It really does.
And here's the kicker. Beaucoup de lumière basically vanished for over a century. Preserved only as a single copy in the National Library of France.
Wow.
Forgotten until its recent rediscovery.
It's amazing.
It's like a lost scroll suddenly resurfacing and rewriting history.
Yes, it is.
This is incredible. So how did this lost book come back into the light?
Well, in the age of the internet, even the most obscure corners of history can be illuminated.
That's right.
The National Library of France digitized their collection, and boom, there it was.
Wow.
This allowed researchers like Adriana Palsone and Paulo Henrique de Figueiredo to rediscover and analyze beaucoup de lumière, bringing Fropo's story and this crucial period in Spiritism's history back to life.
It's amazing how technology can connect us to the past in such unexpected ways.
It really is.
But before we dive into the rediscovery and Fropo's lasting impact, let's pause here for a moment.
Okay.
I want to give you, our listener, a chance to absorb everything we've covered so far.
Yeah.
This is a story full of intrigue, betrayal, and courage, set against the backdrop of a fascinating spiritual movement.
It really makes you think about how history is made not just by famous figures, but by individuals like Fropo who stand up for their convictions and fight for what they believe in.
Exactly. And we'll be back in a moment to delve even deeper into this fascinating story, exploring the lasting impact of Fropo's actions and the rediscovery of her lost book. Don't go anywhere.
I'll be here.
Welcome back to our deep dive. We left off with Berthe of Fropo challenging the status quo of the Spiritist movement. I have to say, this whole story feels like something out of a movie.
It does have all the makings of a great drama. But what's crucial to understand is that this conflict wasn't just about clashing personalities.
Right.
It struck at the heart of what Spiritism meant to its followers.
Yeah.
Fropo truly believed Lemery was betraying Kardec's original vision, diluting its core principles with ideas from other movements.
And her book, Beaucoup de Lumière, became a key piece of evidence in this whole debate.
Right.
It wasn't just gossip. She put it all down in writing.
Exactly. It's a first-hand account from Fropo's perspective.
Right.
Detailing the events, accusations, and justifications behind the split. Remember, this book was basically buried for over 100 years.
Right.
So it provides a fresh and often overlooked perspective on this pivotal moment in Spiritism's history.
It's like finding a lost diary entry that completely changes how we see a historical event.
It really is.
And to think, if it weren't for the internet and the digitization of those archives, this crucial piece of the puzzle might still be missing.
Absolutely. This rediscovery has really energized modern Spiritists.
Yeah.
It challenges us to re-examine the accepted narratives and consider the long-term effects of those early controversies.
Okay, so Lemery is accused of enriching himself and mixing ideas, but what was it specifically about incorporating other spiritualist movements that was so controversial?
Imagine you have this new belief system that's providing comfort and answers about the afterlife.
Okay.
And suddenly those answers are being mixed with ideas that might contradict what you hold dear.
Right.
That's essentially what was happening.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like taking a recipe and suddenly throwing in ingredients that completely changed the flavor. For someone like Fropo, who was so devoted to Kardec's teachings, this must have felt like a betrayal.
Exactly. It's like she saw Lemery creating a spiritual Frankenstein's monster, stitching together parts that didn't belong.
Interesting.
And she wasn't alone in feeling this way.
Right.
Many Spiritists today believe that Fropo's actions were crucial in preserving the core tenets of Kardec's teachings, preventing them from being diluted or distorted by these outside influences.
Wow, so Fropo wasn't just a whistleblower. She's actually seen as a protector of the faith. That's a powerful legacy.
It really is. Her story reminds us that even within spiritual movements, there's room for debate and disagreement, especially as those movements grow and evolve.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes individuals with courage to stand up and say, this isn't right. This isn't what we believe in.
It's a great reminder that critical thinking isn't just for academics or scientists. It applies to our spiritual lives as well. We shouldn't just blindly accept what's presented to us.
Right.
We should question, examine, and seek deeper understanding.
Exactly. And in Fropo's case, this meant challenging powerful figures and risking her own reputation within the movement.
It's inspiring to see someone stand up for what they believe in, even when it's difficult.
Mm.
Her actions had a ripple effect, right? Founding the Union Spirit Française, publishing Le Spiritism, and, of course, her book Resurfacing. All of these events trace back to that initial decision to speak out.
Absolutely. And it also highlights the often overlooked contributions of women in shaping religious and spiritual traditions. It's easy to focus on the big names like Kardec,
Right.
but it's crucial to remember the countless individuals like Fropo who worked tirelessly behind the scenes, influencing the direction and development of these movements.
Her story is a testament to the power of individual conviction and the lasting impact one person can have.
It also prompts us to think about the nature of spiritual movements themselves.
Okay.
They're not static. They evolve and adapt over time, just like societies do.
Right.
And those evolutions are often shaped by passionate individuals who challenge established norms and push for change.
With any social or cultural movement,
Yeah.
there are always going to be different interpretations, disagreements, and calls for reform.
Right. And sometimes those disagreements lead to splits or factions within the movement. It's a natural part of the process. What's important is that we learn from those who came before us,
Yeah.
those who fought to preserve the integrity of their beliefs.
And that brings us back to Fropo. She wasn't afraid to confront those in power, to speak out against what she saw as injustice. That takes a lot of courage, especially for a woman in that era.
You know, it makes you wonder about the kind of person she was outside of all these historical events. What was she like on a personal level?
Well, from the accounts we have, she was known for her compassion and dedication to helping others.
Okay.
Her obituary described her as a true believer who lived her faith, not just talking the talk, but walking the walk.
That definitely comes across in everything we know about her. She wasn't just an armchair philosopher.
Yeah.
She was actively involved in charitable works and used her personal resources to support the poor and marginalized.
She sounds like someone you'd really want to have a conversation with to hear her stories firsthand.
I agree. And her writing reveals a sharp mind and a talent for articulating complex ideas.
Yeah.
Beaucoup de Lumière isn't just a historical document.
Right.
It's a well-crafted piece of writing that allows us to hear her voice across the centuries.
It's a reminder that history isn't just about dates and events.
Yes.
It's about the people who lived through those times, the choices they made, and the impact those choices had on the world around them.
Yes.
And sometimes those impacts aren't fully realized or appreciated until much later.
That's one of the fascinating things about studying history, isn't it? It's constantly being rewritten and reinterpreted as new evidence emerges and new voices are heard.
And who knows? Maybe someday someone will be digging through archives and uncovering our own stories, piecing together the puzzle of our lives and trying to understand the choices we made. It makes you think about the kind of legacy we're leaving behind.
It really does. But before we get too existential, I think there's one more fascinating aspect of Fropo's story that we need to explore.
Oh, and what's that?
This is where things get really interesting. Remember Fropo's husband was a Freemason?
Yes.
Well, there's some speculation that Berthe herself may have been involved in Freemasonry,
Really?
or at least influenced by its ideas and principles.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
That's intriguing. Tell me more.
Well, it's mostly circumstantial evidence at this point.
Yeah.
We know she was married to a Freemason,
Right.
and some historians have pointed out themes in her writings.
Mm.
Her emphasis on reason, morality, and social justice.
Yeah.
That echo-Masonic thought.
I can see the connection Freemasonry has always been associated with those ideals.
Exactly. And some even go so far as to suggest that her stance against Lamerie and her efforts to reform Spiritism might have been influenced by the Masonic ideal of fighting for truth and justice.
So it's like she was applying those Masonic principles to the world of Spiritism,
Yes.
challenging corruption and advocating for a more ethical and transparent approach.
That's an interesting theory. And while we may never have definitive proof of her direct involvement in Freemasonry, the potential connections are certainly worth exploring.
It definitely adds another layer of complexity to her already fascinating story, and it reminds us that individuals are often shaped by a wide range of influences. Those influences can sometimes manifest in unexpected ways, leading them to take bold stands and challenge the status quo.
Absolutely. Berthe Fropo's story is a testament to the interconnectedness of ideas, beliefs, and social movements. And it encourages us to look beyond the surface, to consider the hidden influences that shape individuals and their actions.
This is also thought-provoking, and I feel like we've only just begun to unravel this fascinating connection between Berthe, Fropo Spiritism, and Freemasonry.
I know, right? It's like we've stumbled upon a hidden doorway leading to even more mysteries and insights, and I can't wait to see where it takes us.
But before we open that door and dive into part 3 of our deep dive, let's give our listener a moment to reflect on everything we've uncovered so far. From challenging a powerful leader to preserving the integrity of a spiritual movement, Berthe Fropo's story is a reminder that even seemingly ordinary individuals can have an extraordinary impact on the world. We'll be back in a moment to explore this intriguing connection to Freemasonry and uncover even more fascinating insights about Fropo's life and legacy. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the life and legacy of Berthe Fropo.
It's like we're peeling back the layers of an onion, and with each layer,
Yeah,
we find something new and fascinating.
I like that analogy. And
Remember, we're talking about 19th century France, a time of immense social and intellectual change,
yeah,
where new ideas and movements were constantly emerging and challenging traditional ways of thinking. Right. It was a time ripe for disruption, and Berthe Fropo seems to have been right at the heart of it. So let's dive back into this Freemasonry connection. We know her husband was a member, but what evidence suggests that Fropo herself might have been involved or influenced by their ideas?
well, as we mentioned before, women weren't allowed to officially join Masonic lodges back then.
Right.
But that doesn't mean they were completely shut out from Masonic thought. It's very possible that Fropo was exposed to these ideas through her husband and his social circles.
It makes sense. She was clearly an intelligent and curious woman, and it wouldn't be surprising if she engaged in conversations about philosophy, morality, and social issues with those around her.
Exactly. And remember, Freemasonry emphasized reason logic and a commitment to truth and justice,
Right.
values that clearly resonated with Fropo as we see in her actions and her writings.
So it's possible that some of those core Masonic principles found their way into her approach to Spiritism, especially when she felt the need to challenge Lamorie's leadership and defend what she believed to be the pure form of Kardec's teachings.
That's a very compelling theory. And it's supported by the fact that many of the Spiritists who sided with Fropo in this conflict were also Freemasons or had connections to the movement.
Interesting.
It suggests that there was a shared worldview and a sense of solidarity among those who were critical of Lamorie's direction.
It's almost as if the values they embraced within Freemasonry spilled over into their approach to Spiritism. It's like those values transcended any specific organization or movement and became a guiding principle in their lives.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It reminds us that individuals are often shaped by a confluence of influences, and those influences can intersect and overlap in unexpected ways.
It also highlights the interconnectedness of these different movements and ideas during this period. It wasn't just about Spiritism or Freemasonry in isolation. They were part of a larger tapestry of social and intellectual change that was sweeping across Europe.
Exactly. It was a time of ferment, a crucible where new ideas were being forged and tested. And Berthe Fropo, with her unwavering convictions and her willingness to challenge the status quo, was right at the forefront of this transformation.
Her story shows us that even seemingly small acts of courage can ripple outward and create significant change, both within specific movements and in the broader society.
Absolutely. And while we may never know the full extent of Fropo's connection to Freemasonry, the potential influence is undeniable. It adds yet another layer of complexity to her story and invites us to consider the hidden forces that shape individuals and movements throughout history.
This deep dive has been such a fascinating journey. We started by exploring the life of a relatively unknown figure in Spiritism, and we ended up uncovering a complex web of connections, controversies, and historical mysteries.
It's a perfect example of how delving into a specific topic can lead us down unexpected paths and broaden our understanding of history as a whole. And it's a reminder that history is never truly finished. There are always new discoveries to be made and new perspectives to be explored.
It also makes you wonder about all the other hidden figures out there, the individuals whose stories haven't yet been fully told, the people who played crucial roles in shaping our world, but whose contributions have been overlooked or forgotten.
And it makes you appreciate the work of historians, researchers, and archivists who dedicate their lives to unearthing these hidden stories and shedding light on the past. Who knows what other treasures are waiting to be discovered in dusty archives or forgotten libraries?
It's exciting to think about. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the life and legacy of Berthe Fropo, what key takeaways should our listener remember?
I think her story reminds us that courage and conviction can make a difference even when facing powerful opposition. It highlights the importance of critical thinking and questioning assumptions, especially within our belief systems.
Right.
And it shows us that even seemingly ordinary individuals can play extraordinary roles in shaping the course of history.
It's also a powerful testament to the often overlooked contributions of women in shaping religious and spiritual movements. And it underscores the interconnectedness of ideas, beliefs, and social movements, reminding us that history is rarely straightforward or one-dimensional.
We should never underestimate the ripple effect of our actions. Just like Berthe Fropo, we all have the potential to leave a lasting impact on the world, even in ways we might not fully realize.
Her story encourages us to be curious, to ask questions, and to never stop exploring the hidden corners of history. You never know what fascinating stories and inspiring individuals you might uncover.
Well said. And on that note, we'd like to thank you, our listener, for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of Berthe Fropo. We hope you've enjoyed the journey as much as we have.
Until next time, keep those minds curious and those spirits adventurous.